Okay, this part of the presentation moves on to some of the other common issues that I face when talking to parents about video games. It's the assumptions about what video games mean, which generally means acts of violence, and in the minds of the consciousness of people, it appears to be games like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto that get the headlines, and therefore, unfortunately, these are the kinds of games that typify what video gamers do and the kind of things they play. A stereotype that's quite unhelpful. Now, while these games have their place, the point we need to note is that they're aimed at adults. So in this case, 17 plus. And as a 44-year-old adult, I think it's perfectly okay to play games like this. This isn't really my kind of game, but not because of the violence, more because of the genre. On every platform, there are plenty of games that are completely safe. Mario's arguably one of the most iconic and famous games characters and game types that the world has ever seen, and yet rarely seems to get talked about when people are having conversations about what games are healthy or unhealthy. That's on the Nintendo. On the Xbox, of course, there are games like Banjo and Kazooie. I'm not going to lie, it is harder to find safe, kid-friendly games on the Xbox, but they are there. On the PlayStation, Blob 2 is a great game. But really, if you want a kid-friendly game, you stick with a Nintendo as a platform. You generally are quite safe. This is the latest Nintendo console, the Wii U. Pikmin 3 is a good example of a critically acclaimed game that, as you can see from the rating, is safe for anyone to play. I think we need to move on to media bias. I think there's a sense that we need to be kind of media agnostic here. There's assumptions that when kids are reading, it's safe and it's good for you and there's nothing harmful about it, which is quite frankly a myth. In my mind, I feel when parents somewhat nostalgically consider the idea of their child reading, they have this lovely kind of Enid Blyton kind of idea, when the reality could be very different. I would imagine that any parent seeing their kid reading this would be probably quite pleased. What if they're reading this? This I mean, I've read this, it's a fantastic book. I wouldn't recommend it to my son to read, not yet, when he's older. The question is not is it reading, but what are you reading about? A fantastic book, not such a great film. Inappropriate for children, yes. Appropriate for adults, yes, like many games are. This is a book which I would imagine most of you wouldn't have any problem with avoiding your children reading for now. I think it's easier to make this argument with films. Films can be appalling. Some would argue this is an amazing film, not for children. So we need to look beyond the media, look at the content of the media, and stop just assuming video games by themselves are clearly, they seem to get more criticism than I would say is fair. We need to be consistent with our criticism across the different types of media. That's not to say that games aren't very different. Games are quite unique compared to, say, games. They are a much more interactive medium, a much more active medium. This isn't a judgment of other forms of media, but I do think we need to accept that there are positives about games that don't often get spoken about. They are active. And watching TV, reading, passive. This is not a judgment. It's perfectly acceptable to participate in activities that are passive. But there's something kind of fantastic about the fact that games are a much more active experience than the others. There's also this kind of assumption that we watch someone in that nice meditative pose, browsing their book, but what are they reading? Something like this, or something like this. The boy's reading a comic. Is he reading Tintin? Or is he reading this? I mean, my son brought this home recently. He's a grade 6 child, and the content of it is quite horrific. I've read the novels that go with it. Again, they are completely appropriate for adults to read, not so much for children to read. And we have to get this message. It's the same with games. Not all games are appropriate for children to play. Now, while we're talking about books, I think it's fair to consider that there are things we can compare. This is from a leading academic in the field of video games and the whole idea of interactive three-dimensional simulations, which is really what video games are. But my point is they're not value neutral. Books can be positive, books can be negative, depending on the book, depending on the kind of content the books present to the reader.
This is my argument for why video games are the winners, are the greatest of all these industries, right? Video games do a thing that no other industry does. You cannot be bad at watching a movie. You cannot be bad at listening to an album. But you can be bad at playing a video game. And the video game will punish you and deny you access to the rest of the video game. No other art form does this. You've never been reading a book and 3 chapters in, the book has gone, what are the major themes of the book so far? Well, I don't know. Well, you've never been listening to an album. After 4 songs, the album has gone, dance, dance. Show me your dancing is good enough to merit this. You go, is this good enough? And the album goes, no, and stops. No other art, but video games do it all the time.
So that's Dara O'Brien, a great comedian, a clever man, and as you can probably see, a video gamer. And I think he encapsulates quite neatly a lot of the reasons why I enjoy playing video games, as well as reading books and watching TV and watching films. Because games have a unique element to them that books and TV and films do not. They are essentially problem-solving spaces. Any game you care to play is essentially a series of problems that you need to solve. Some of the games, Minecraft is the most obvious example, actually provide opportunities for the gamer to create within that space. I would have to say that's quite a rare thing and makes Minecraft quite unique. We do, though, get to often affect the outcome of the game in a much more exciting way than maybe the old adventure books I used to read in the 80s did. The things that you do in the game actually play out in real time while you're playing the game. This makes for a uniquely powerful experience. You are solving problems in real time, seeing the outcome of your decisions in a dynamic, immediate way. You have to respond to those in real time. That is something which is unique. It's powerful, it's exciting, it's what makes the great games the best games. Unfortunately, not all games are great. We'll get to that subject later. Games like Minecraft, you probably heard about World of Warcraft. Most or many of the games that are on the market now do have multiplayer elements, which arguably do develop quite sophisticated social skills. There is more to that as well. But my point is, this is an area of experience which is unique to games and not one that you'll find in books and watching TV, and one I think we should treasure and encourage, not discourage. This is a screenshot from my son's Minecraft game, and I think you take the time to look at some of the comments. Of course, there'll be times when there's swearing in there, but then you get swearing in a playground. I think we need to, again, have this thing about being consistent about our approach as parents. Am I going to stop my son from playing in the playground because he may hear swearing? No, I'm not. I would take steps if I felt that he was playing somewhere where there was a lot of swearing. Maybe I'd say, come home now, come back later. In the same thing with an online environment, I look over his shoulder. If there's a lot of inappropriate language, I'll ask him to play on a different server, or maybe to stop playing and come back and play later when those people have gone away. The problem isn't the game. The problem isn't the technology. The problem is the kids that are playing in there. These are American scientists, and from the federation that they had recently, I just pulled this quote from their article. The point is that these games and these gaming experiences are actually building what we would call 21st century competencies, which is another way of saying what we call soft skills. They're things to do with collaboration and synthesis and analysis. These are skills that are commonly seen in the gaming space and are skills arguably that will be and are in demand out there in the world outside school, in the world of employed work. If you're interested in reading more in terms of the academic side of gaming and the positives that it can present, you can't really do better than going and following James Paul Gee. Just Google him. He has a blog. He has academic articles and books that he's written, and there's plenty of content there for you should you want to explore it further.